Welcome to ProSessions, our series focused on generating revenue in the new digital economy. Today, we're diving into the NFT space with special guests who'll share their diverse perspectives. We have two incredibly talented music creators with personal experiences with NFT drops. We'll look at the business side from Artist Management Outlook and a new NFT platform about to launch, and an attorney who specializes in blockchain and NFTs. I want to welcome Grammy Award winner R.a.c. and Ryan, aka Wax Wane. We recently did a survey of our 22,000 members, and the feedback that we got was that only 35% have completed or are currently planning an NFT drop, and 65% have not. But a lot of the questions were around being ready to do it. And so I wanted to start off with some basics, if you'll share that with us. And the first one is, starting out, how do you decide what do you include in your drop? What platform do you use? How do you price it? Let's talk about that for just a second.
I'm happy to jump in there. And by the way, thank you for having me. When I kind of dove into this space at first, it was very much undefined. It felt like there were a couple of platforms, but there was nothing really like music centric or anything like that. And so the almost like the options that we have are just like somewhat limited, right? We had super rare, there was like, I think Rareable at the time, but none of them necessarily supported music. So it was kind of the choice is sort of made for me in a way where it's like, okay, well, this is what's available, so let me just try to work within this framework, which I think helped, again, for me personally. It helped kind of narrow it down. But now when I look at sort of the wider landscape, I mean, there's so many different options and so many different new platforms popping up seemingly every day. So there's a lot to unpack here, but I think like maybe where I would start is like, just as a creative person, is like, what are you trying to convey? Like what are you trying to create? Like start with the actual creation. And almost like think about it that way, it's like, what do you have to say to the world? Like, because if you think about like what an NFT is and what we're doing here, it's like sort of adding this scarcity layer to music, to something or art, and just in a way that you couldn't really before. So it was like, okay, well, how does that change anything? It's like, people put out these like B-sides and rarities albums, but they aren't really B-sides and rarities if you can just buy infinite copies of them, right? So it's like you start to think about things a little bit differently, and maybe you still put out your major releases, but maybe you put out like an alternative version of a song that's rare, or there's all kinds of ways to approach this, and I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, because the spectrum is so big. So you have the fine art model on one side, which is what I've personally dabbled with a little bit more, like ultra rare, one of ones, like that kind of a thing. But then you have the other end, which is collectibles, and something that's a lot more accessible, quite frankly, and your wider fan base can get engaged with. So but I still think, like, when I approach this question, and like when I work with other artists or like friends of mine that hit me up, I was like, hey, how do I do this? I really just try to like focus on like what they're creating, like let's start there. Let's start on the art, or if you want to make a more collectible type of a thing, I still consider that art, but like what do you want to create that you think your audience would enjoy, and that usually kind of leads that's sort of leads into like the following questions that you brought up, like the platforms and the pricing and all that stuff. So sort of like I like to start with the artwork.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Ryan, you have any thoughts on that?
Having a vision and following an idea, like for me, it was really, so I got into it by collaborating with a friend who is an artist in the space named Nate Hill. And it really, to me, I just saw it as this really cool opportunity to do an artistic new thing in a brand new space, And so having that laid out in front of me, and then seeing, like trying to figure out what, like you said, where does that idea take you? Where do you want to go? And I went more of it was still more of a collectible route, but I wanted to make something that that provided like almost like a game or an adventure or value in that way for the collectors. And so the thing that really caught my excitement with NFTs wasn't just like tokenizing things like music and whatnot, but it was trying to capture like that feeling that I got when I was first opening a pack of Magic cards when I was a kid, you know, like that thing of trying to collect all these things and then providing a real like a like a prize for the people who jumped in on this journey with us. And so we had, you know, I've done one drop on Nifty Gateway, and it was a really cool experience with Nate making the art and then me putting music to it, and then just kind of crafting this whole thing where you know, if people collect a certain amount and if they hold it for a certain amount of time, then they would unlock rewards. And that really making it so it's not just this one and done thing, making it so it can like stretch out over a period of time and hold people's excitement and attention. I thought that was brilliant when you're talking about how it just start with the art. I think in this space, it's really the artists that are the rock stars. You know, the artists are the ones who have forged this thing ahead from the beginning. You know, and you can see that continuing on with things like I don't even know how to say it, but Hen, the Tezos platform. Like just the artists they basically built this community out of nowhere, and they're all like, every artist there is pretty much a collector because they're all buying each other's stuff and raising each other's you know, raising the tide for all the boats. And yeah, it's just it's a really cool time to be able to figure that out. And as far as like pricing goes and whatnot, all that stuff, yeah, it really just depends on what your approach is. But usually the platform you're working with, like Nifty Gateway, they were a really big resource for questions. Any question I asked, they had an answer and they helped me out. And they're the ones who had all the research and all the data of what is working and what price points work. So you know, if you are getting into releasing NFTs on a platform, usually you'll have like a contact at that platform where you can kind of just ask, or, you know, even just friends who have been experienced in it. Like, you know, if Andre here was one of my close pals, I would have called him up, be like, hey dude, what should I do? And I'm sure that his information would have been way better than mine, because.
So Andre, I want to talk a little about that. I know you have 6. Is it 6 agency or is it just 6?
Yeah. We call it 6 agency. Yeah.
And so what are you doing to help other creators, you know, do these drops or help plan around this?
Yeah, so yeah, just for some context, so you know, I've been releasing NFTs on my own through various different platforms, and just to second something real quick is like, yeah, definitely lean into the platforms as a resource for pricing. They know the market pretty well, and they'll be able to at least give you like an estimate or approximation. There's a lot of work that goes into like working with collectors. Again, it depends on what style of release you do, but you know, I think it's really important to sort of establish a relationship with your collectors and you know, foster that. And they'll give you feedback on pricing too. So yeah, get a lot of feedback. Maybe that's what we're saying. But yeah, so real quick about 6. So yeah, we called it 6 agency. The idea of it was, me and a group of friends, we had sort of been in this space for a long time, like 2017. Had seen, you know, the rise and fall of crypto many times at this point, but we still believed in it as a fundamental sort of technology that would enable a lot of these like more far-fetched ideas. And you know, now we're starting to see them in practice, and I think that was really you know, we saw the NFT market especially like bubble up like crazy. But we're actually more focused on the wider, like we call it Web3, so like Web3 ecosystem. So anything crypto, but really it's like basically the idea is to let's create economies around artists and enable them to be independent and to have like a sustainable business model, you know, on their own. And that's something that I'm trying to do myself, and I think I've been successful at that. And now I'm basically trying to apply it to other artists. And a lot of, so we've had a lot of sort of inbound interest from, you know, people in the music industry that want to explore this space. And again, because it's so new and so different, we just happen to be perhaps well positioned for it. So we started an agency to sort of cater to that. And we've been helping a lot of people enter this wider ecosystem. Perhaps NFTs is the first step, but moving into social tokens, you know, metaverses, like all this other fun stuff that we can get into. But you know, that was the idea. Let's do this right. You know, like we have an opportunity here. You know, I could like, this could go in a multiple different ways, and I think there's a couple of those outcomes that are kind of negative for the space. So I felt like, you know, okay, an artist-run, artist-led type of organization that helps you know, other artists sort of navigate this space, and because there's a lot of nuance to it, I think would be beneficial to the wider ecosystem. So, you know, that's kind of our take on it. And we're, if there's not like any single, there's no, none of the projects are really alike. They're all kind of different, you know, and it ranges from just basic NFT drops to like full, you know, events and metaverse concerts. And, you know, we just try to, you know, just help people do things that they actually care about and that make sense for their own brand and for their own, you know, artist projects. So yeah, that's something we've been doing for I guess like three or 4 months now, and it's been great. It's been a lot of work, but it's been good.
I remember
That's
when you guys launched that. I remember the tweet. I was so pumped because, dude, like Andre is like OG in the NFT community, like for artists. It's so cool, like to be able to see like all the different stuff that you've done, and now get to be on a panel with you. So
Nice.
awesome.
Oh, thanks.
so let's get back to that for someone who is starting out and who you know, I know it's a new playing field, but people are afraid of making mistakes. You know, you hear about some artists getting lambasted for the environmental impact, or, you know, being afraid of not succeeding. And then whether you're an independent artist or signed to a label, you have, you know, different capabilities in terms of choosing what you're going to include in a drop. Um, and then the other piece was, and I think Ryan, you used a term that I loved, those people who came in because they thought they were going to make $1 million or some quick money, and there, then you found yourself combating what you referred to as the low effort drops. So if for those creators who are just getting into it, besides the artistic aspect of it, what's really important to consider in taking those first steps if they're afraid of making mistakes?
I mean, I really, again, saying everything I already said about the art and like letting that sort of lead the rest of it. But you know, I think taking it slow and sort of not overdoing it, not put like what I mean by that is like not putting up 10 pieces at once, you know, like try one and then reach out to different people and see if anybody, like, because a lot of people like to buy an artist's first piece, you know, like, so there's sort of a market for that. And if you get into like a bigger collection, okay, then you have some notoriety, you can sort of work with that and like find other collectors. And again, I'm maybe speaking more from the fine art side because that's more of my focus. uh but it's actually more emphasis on a smaller group of people. So you know, sort of figuring out who those people are and seeing if they're interested in the art that you're making. That again, just taking it slow and just being calculating about it, and being not trying to rush into anything, and just timing it right. I think like one thing that I learned along the way was like really good communication with the collectors, and really trying to, like, even during an auction, just being like, you know, thank you for whatever, thank you for the bid, sort of giving them information about like what else is happening, and like you know, the times that it's going to end. Like there's some like a lot of mundane kind of practical stuff that should happen as well. But I think another thing you know, that comes to mind is sort of just engaging with the community. And I we're talking about like low effort NFTs, which there were a lot of them. And to be fair, like Nifty Gateway, at one point there was like a couple week period where they were playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire every day, like just because there was so many big drops around that time, and a lot of people made a lot of money, but you can kind of tell like who stuck around and who actually put some effort into being involved in the community. And I don't mean just like Clubhouse chats, but like in the chat rooms and the discords and like all this other stuff. Like there's people that really put in a lot of effort, and I think the community of buyers and collectors like really recognize that. So I think just being, maybe even before doing a drop, just engage with the community, maybe buy a piece or two and see how you feel about it. And I don't know, maybe that's a good way to approach it. Again, my own personal experience was a little bit different, just because it was so open-ended. We had no idea what we were doing, but yeah, I mean, that's sort of my take on it. Yeah.
So testing the waters is good. Ryan, I know when we spoke last time, you had a really great perspective of making sure that the people who acquired your NFTs got value, and you felt a responsibility not only for the value, but understanding they were your super fans.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are buying these NFTs from you, they want to support you. There's lots of different reasons why they would buy it, but really, like when it comes down to it, they like what you do, and I wanted to reward that. I wanted to reward those people who really were the super fans. And so like people who collected 5 or more, I had a drop of 10 open editions that were 10 different songs with different animations, and people who held a certain amount of pieces at one point, something like awoken in there. Like there was a new NFT that awoke in their collection. And it was just really cool to kind of like tease these things out and see people, because then people started buying them on the secondary market to try and get their 5 or for before this certain date. And it was just cool to kind of see like almost like a frenzy. Like one day you'd be getting a bunch of emails saying, I got all these different secondary market sales, and just different things to make sure that it, there's longevity. There's something that that keeps people interested. And it was interesting, because usually I think this is what happens after a drop is done. You feel this big sense of relief. You're like, I finally got it out. But for me, actually, because there was so much other stuff afterwards, I didn't get that relief until it was fully done, like a month later. But it was worth it. It was worth it to be able to have these extra pieces that my biggest collectors would get. And they, like you said, communication with collectors is a huge thing. Like that was one thing after the fact, just all the different communication, thanking, and like just sending them different things. Like I sent them the album and whatnot. You really want to take care of the people who are taking care of you. And
That's awesome. By the way, speaking of taking care of the people who take care of you, I do want to thank you for the donation drop NFT drop that you made to Music Cares. It was greatly appreciated, and it was a really generous gesture that you made.
Well, I mean, Music Cares, my life is a free roll. Like there's so many cool things that have happened in my life that are just completely out of my hands. And Music Cares was one of them. There was a time in my life that I was just at the lowest point. I had no ideas, no resources, nowhere to go. And Music Cares kind of just swooped in and helped me out. And I didn't even know who they were at the time. Like it was this completely random thing, and as an artist, as an independent artist, you don't really have like a safety net. It's just you trying to make all the decisions and trying to connect all the dots, and to have that grace just basically be bestowed on me was amazing. And so when I had the chance to do this NFT drop, and I was working with Mike Shinoda on a song, and I was like, I'd already planned to release I had the NFT drop already planned, but once he started working, I was like, I need to do this as a one of one, and I want to give it to Music Cares. And
That was
it was
awesome.
just so cool in full circle how it just all kind of came back. And even just to hear after the fact, just the different people that it's gone to help. It's just, I don't know. I'm so thankful and so glad that that piece was part of this whole thing. Music here is incredible.
I
Well,
just want to mention real quick, just because I have a quick, like, I won't dwell on it, but I'll just say, like, Music Here has actually helped me at a very kind of, like, several years ago, like, sort of a vulnerable moment, and it was, like, incredibly helpful at the time. So I'm a big fan.
Well, thank you, both of you. I know they very much appreciate all of it. Can we talk a little bit about the environmental impact? If you're an artist starting out with this and you are concerned about the any negative feedback, or how do you address that when people ask you about the concerns on the environmental impact?
This is a tricky one, because there's a lot of, I think, like, somewhat misinformation that is sort of gone around about this, or it's a misinterpretation of some of the facts, like, in the sense that, like, some elements of it have been extremely exaggerated, but on the other hand, there are some, like, real, like, realities that I think artists need to accept, and is that proof of work blockchains are incredibly wasteful in their current state. I think what I like to focus on is that this has been a known problem for, like, several years, and some of the brightest, smartest people in the world have been literally trying to solve this, like, discover new computer science to, like, solve this, which in my view is a solved problem at this point. It's just an implementation issue. So, Ethereum's sort of the biggest one, obviously. That has NFTs is sort of in the process of transitioning. So there's a lot of nuance to this, and a lot of really smart people are working on it. And I like to be sort of optimistic about it, that it's being solved. I mean, there's a lot of stuff already in motion, and Ryan even mentioned some other platforms on Tezos, and there's all these on Solana as well. All these different things that are happening that are not energy intensive. But just one last thing is, like, about, like, how artists react to it. I think it's been really interesting to see how harsh sometimes the fan bases can react to it, and I think a lot of that is due to sort of a misunderstanding of how it works. And I don't know, we always sort of warn people, like, with the agency, like, when we're going through these drops, like, we try to give them some resources, like how to communicate it properly, or, like, so a lot of people like to do carbon offsets and things like that, which I think are great in general. So it's I don't know, there's a couple ways to navigate it, but it's sort of a very nuanced conversation that a lot of people can't have over Twitter, because there's just not enough characters to,
Well, I think we're going to talk about it a little bit in part two, because I know that some of the folks have some opinions on it as well, and maybe even some solutions.
Mhm.
Two more questions. We could probably do this for an hour. Publishing, sync, mechanical. What's your take on it?
Ryan, do you want to go for it, or?
Wild, wild west. That's what I think. I have no, I don't know either way. I'm kind of just in the making them. I haven't, all of my stuff, I haven't, like, everything that I've worked with has not, I haven't had to get into that part of it, so it's all been just with me and another creator.
Yeah, so my take on that is, like, it well, I'm sure the industry will find a way to sort of call it something, but, like, when it really comes down to it, you're selling a digital autograph, if you want a digital signature, and even the piece of content can be hosted elsewhere. It could be uploaded by somebody else. It could also even be just a string of characters that represents that original piece of content. So it doesn't even, like, you're not really selling the content. So you're selling the one authorized copy, for example. So it really opens up a whole nother, I don't think really any of the music industry frameworks really work here. I know there's a lot of really smart, I'm sure even on this, on the next panel, that could probably have a different opinion on it. But, like, my take on it is, like, I don't think really our current models work here. So I think there would have to be something new, and we're gonna have to figure that out.
Um, uh, where is it going? What do you think what is the long term? Does it stay as NFTs? I know there are some people who even hate the term NFT at this point. What do you see as the long term opportunity for creators to generate new revenue from this? Does it stay where it is? What does that look like?
Well, just to piggyback off of something that Ryan said, like the programmatic nature of it, I think is amazing, and a lot of people gloss over that, or like being able to reward somebody that has 5 pieces, like that. That's something I think a lot of people don't only think about this as a static thing, when really this can be programmatic. Anything you can, dream up, you can make it programmatic. So like, for example, we worked on this project with the artist BT, and he did a 24-hour piece of music that changes depending on the weather and like where you are and like all this stuff. And it's like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's where I think a lot of this will head over. We're still figuring it out, obviously, but like, that's where I think a lot of this is headed, where we're creating like truly digital, interesting experiences that are really an entirely new medium that we can't even think of right now. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. Last question, because I know we're running out of time. Should the industry create, and when I mean industry, should the creative industry create a standards body around where this is going? And by standards body, a community of artists, managers, an organization like the Recording Academy, that represents lots of members. Should there be some type of standards body so that we can help ensure that a technology company or technology companies don't come in and build another business on the back of creators?
Anytime you create any kind of regulatory body, if you want to think about it that way, I don't mean to make it sound like it's some like governmental thing, because I think your head's in the right space where it's, I think it should be by industry, artists, and everybody kind of coming together to decide on something. But I think that one of the things that I like about blockchain is that nothing is enforceable. So I like the idea of creating some kind of standards body, but that because it's not enforceable, it really sort of the idea or the standards need to have their own merit. So I think that actually really levels the playing field, and will the standard that will come out of this, which there already is, to some degree, like the ERC 721 and the 1156, I think. There are already some standards, but for example, like the 10% royalty back to the artist is sort of a standard that somewhat emerged naturally. So I think maybe some kind of body that would sort of maybe assimilate a lot of the things that just already happen naturally, and maybe enforce it, even if it's just socially. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of already happening. Like people, social, not clout, but social standing. Like if you're doing something wrong or shady in the NFT space, like people call you out on it pretty quickly. Like there's a lot of smart people who have a lot of eyes looking at a lot of different things, and so it's probably pretty tough to get away with things. But yeah, as far as having an official one, I mean, it really depends on who's involved, right? If you have people that you trust with the space, but yeah, I'm it's above my pay grade to make those decisions. So I'm just gonna hang out and
Well, thank you guys so much. I know we can talk for another hour on this, and we'll probably do some follow-up and snippets, but I appreciate your joining us today. Have an awesome rest of your day, and thanks again. We're going to keep an eye on your NFTs. Joining us for part 2 of this session, focusing on the business of NFTs, is Adam Fell with Quincy Jones Productions, Joshua James with OneOf, and Jacob Martin of JTM Tech Law. Welcome, guys. I guess Adam and Josh, will start with you. Would love to hear more about OneOf. And Adam, as a manager of artists that are signed to a lot of major labels, and I know you've had a lot of conversations with major labels, it's very different for a major label artist than an independent artist who has the ability to kind of pave their own path and perhaps test things out in ways that if you're signed to a major label, you might not be able to do?
You know, this is a very exciting technology for independent creators because they obviously have the flexibility to do music NFTs and of course make the decisions on how they do that. We as a company have decided that, you know, we want to offer all artists that ability. And so we are deep in conversations with independent artists, major label artists, those subsequent labels, those subsequent publishers, et cetera, because, you know, when you look at what this technology affords these artists, it's a whole new revenue stream that doesn't cannibalize any of the other revenue streams. And that's a really exciting thing for me as an artist manager.
So Josh and Adam, just really quickly, if you have a new artist who is looking to, you know, jump into the NFT space, and again, people have hesitated because they don't know what to include in a drop, or they're afraid of some of the limitations. What's your advice for them? How do you get started beyond the art?
Well, one thing that's worth mentioning is that unlike some other platforms that are out there, we're not a crypto platform. We're not an art platform. We're a music platform. And music fans and musicians are sort of what we built the platform for. On the fan side, you can sign up in 3 minutes and use a credit card. You have to know how to fund an Ethereum wallet and all that sort of stuff. Prices can be as little as $1. I say all this because for an artist, to answer your question, when you're coming in, if you know that your NFTs have to be $300, $400, $500 plus, it limits what you can do from a platform perspective and from an artistic perspective. So we sort of are excited about the fact that if you are a new artist and you want to sell $1 NFTs to your first 1,000 fans on Instagram, you can do that. And now 3 years later, when you win a Grammy, that $1 NFT is essentially the rookie card. And since we can protect the resale royalty as that NFT trades in value over time, the artist essentially is making money at every transaction along the way.
Josh just said a bunch of different things, you know, and I want to make sure that, you know, we get into some of the reasons as to why, right? We on the first part of this talk, you guys got a little bit into proof of stake versus proof of work. We intentionally did a lot of research on which blockchain technology partner we should partner up with. We ended up building this on Tezos. You know, the other creators you were talking to were talking about Hen and the NFT platform that has appeared on Tezos in the art world. We are building a music NFT platform on Tezos. What that gives us the ability to do is really address the 4 main concerns of creators. Those concerns are the environmental impact, the idea that you would be perceived as making a cash grab, 3, that you are doing something that's too complicated for the average music fan, and 4, that the fans could circumvent the resale royalty. And, you know, we were doing this research, and basically as we figured out that there were ways to solve all 4 of those things currently, we, meaning me and Quincy Jones, got very excited about this because there is a way to do this from a green perspective, from an environmentally sustainable perspective. There is a way to do this from a democratized perspective where you're not just making a cash grab, but instead you're selling NFTs that are reasonably priced to all of your fans. There is a way to do this where it's not complicated. Like Josh said, it's not a crypto play, but instead something you're doing for your fans. And then, of course, the 4th thing, which he already covered, which is how do you protect the resale royalty when, you know, it's pretty widely publicized how you can get around it on Ethereum. And so when you solve those 4 things, suddenly I think this becomes a viable option for artists to have that additional revenue stream.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you talk about the, you know, people being, artists being afraid of, you know, it being a cash grab, because what I find beautiful about what R.A.C. and Ryan of Wax Wane were doing is they really do care not only about the buyers, but about how they can leverage these people who are investing essentially in them and their art on creating a relationship, a deeper relationship, and really looking at it as much of a marketing opportunity as it is a revenue generating opportunity. And I think that's really important as a music community to focus on, because that's what will sustain NFTs or whatever they end up being called in the long term. So first of all, when are you guys launching OneOf?
In the mid-July to early August timeframe. We're sort of working on that right now.
And I'm going to let Jacob jump in and on this in just a second, because I think you guys have a lot more opinions. Publishing?
First and foremost, I think it depends on the NFT, Lisa. You know, there is everything from a song that streams out of the NFT locker to a original video that has custom graphics, maybe even branding from a brand that pays to be a part of it, and the music is going along with that, right? So the first thing I'd say is I think it depends, you know, on what the actual NFT is. And I think that the previous people you were talking to might be right in that, you know, there needs to be some real thinking around this. I don't think that we as a platform are the right people to make this decision, frankly, right? This is a conversation between the artists, the labels, and the publishers. And, you know, our hope is that this just can be done in a fair way where all three parties feel that they're properly compensated.
Yeah, I think, you know, hey, Adam and Josh, nice to meet you guys. I guess to give the 2 seconds is, I'm not a traditional music attorney, but I've been working with smart contracts and crypto for almost 5 years at this point. And so as an attorney, I think this, I've been drug into art and music and other things. And the publishing one is really interesting, right? Because Blau has made clear, like Justin has made clear, that ASCAP is not something he loves, like with royalties and with just the flow of things in general and everyone involved. So there's something about this direct to consumer that is clearly beautiful for independent artists, but there's going to be a true, like, I'm expecting some kind of roundtable come to Jesus moment with publishers, with musicians, with agents, with managers. Like, there's probably already some private meetings happening in Hollywood right now as far as, like, you know, how are we going to let our artists participate, but how do we participate? Because if an independent artist has proven that they can put up a cool visual and a song, that's proof that a big artist could also just put up a visual and a song, right? But that doesn't mean that they have either permission to do that or that that's best for their brand, right? There's a reason that there's these brand identities built around artists, and people like Adam manage artists. And so, yeah, I think there's going to be a question you asked in the previous panel, like, is there going to be a new industry standard? From like a decentralization perspective, I don't think that's a great question or like a goal of like, here's the new rules of the new world. But to have some kind of framework where there is like a clear relationship of kind of like, if you get these services from a manager, then kind of here's the route. If you get these services from a publisher, here's the route. You know, like, I do expect some kind of new frameworks to arise, because from an IP perspective and like a universal deal signed with artist management groups, like, you just can't even play in this sandbox if there isn't a new framework that everybody's cool with.
There are also, sorry, Lisa, there are also pricing complications around publishing. You could have the same track as a one of 100,000 that sold for $2 that was a one of one that sold for $100,000. So does the publishing work the same on both of those sales? Because it's the exact same track and it's one copy. So it's definitely the wild, wild west.
Yeah, because even that jumps to the song itself, right? So like, from a publishing perspective, it's still just a song, no matter how many times it was digitally autographed, right? So like, how many Beatles albums did the Beatles actually sit down and sign the cover of? Probably a lot, but the copyrights and the publishing and the revenue generation was all based on the song itself. So like, maybe slicing it a million ways matters, maybe it doesn't matter. Which copy goes on Apple Music later, right? Which copy goes through the publisher later? Which copy like generates revenue from the radio? I don't know. That one's, This is all TBD a little bit.
Lisa, the other thing, you know, obviously you can imagine, we've been having conversations with artists, with labels, with publishers. Almost everyone we talk to has a different opinion on this. And so earlier, when you asked the previous guests, should there be like an association that protects this so that it doesn't become something where it's like Silicon Valley taking advantage of creators again? You know, I think the first task of a body like that should be working on this exact conundrum, right? Because frankly, as a platform, for us, we're just trying to figure out what's fair, but it's not really our place, right? This is a discussion between the artists, the labels, and the publishers.
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about the standards body that has been brought up a couple times, I think it's more artist-led in collaboration with all of the other entities that are in the music ecosystem. But I think for, you know, usually
Agreed.
it's corporate-led. So I think it's an important topic as we go forward. Where does this go? I know you're still at the point of launching your platform, you know, based on what NFTs look like today. But Josh and Adam, where do you think this, what's the future of NFTs? Someone called it a lightning rod for what, you know, what people were anticipating of blockchain and cryptocurrency. But obviously you're doing it not necessarily based on cryptocurrency. So where do you see it going?
It's just a continuation of the relationship between fan and artist into a sort of a different medium. You know, again, I keep harping on the, and I apologize for that, on the low cost, but you know, we're going to be doing hundreds of thousands of NFTs for $2, $3, $4, $5. And instead of it being an investment by a fan, it's really just another way to connect to your fans as an artist. And they're buying a $2 NFT, not because it's an investment or they're hoping it's going to be worth $1,000 one day. They're buying a $2 NFT because it's another way to connect with the artist that they love. Right now, you sort of have touring, you have, you know, digital downloads, which are pretty much gone. You have streaming, and the ways to connect with your artists are limited. And this is sort of a fun way to move that forward. You know, when I was a kid, I collected Michael Jordan cards because I loved Michael Jordan. It wasn't because one day I thought they were going to be worth $10,000. It was just a fun way to continue my fandom. And so we think of it as a fun collectible space where fans can engage more with the artists going forward. Where it goes 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to answer that question. I don't think anyone knows. Blockchain and crypto change on a weekly basis. But I think in the end, that connection between the fan and the artist will find its home moving forward into this space.
Adam, any thoughts?
I mean, I think Josh's answer was great. A lot of the same things I would have said, but you know, there's incredible ramifications for concert ticketing. When you think about resale experiences, so in other words, perpetual or semi-perpetual experiences. In other words, I'm a DJ. Right now, I can go on to a number of platforms and sell me coming to your party and DJing. But I can't go on to a number of platforms and sell, I'm going to come and DJ a party for you once a year for the next 30 years or however long I DJ. And the reason that you can't do that in the best possible way is because, of course, if someone were to buy that experience, right, an experience that goes on for decades, they might want to resell it after a period of time. And in the previous world, of course, resellable items, let's say it's a signed CD, the creator gets nothing. But in this world, if you can protect that resale royalty, suddenly you sell a perpetual or a semi-perpetual experience, and that can be all sorts of things, right? You could sell, instead of front row seats to your concert, you could sell front row seats to every concert you ever do for the rest of your career if you need to cash out something, right? And you're seeing all these creators now go and sell all their masters, sell all their publishing because they're desperate for cash. Why not sell a front row seat to your concert right now, but a front row seat that goes to every concert you ever have? And if that person one day decides, I've been in the front row for enough concerts, and they resell it, you get a royalty because you've built that into the smart contract. This stuff gets more and more exciting as you go further down that rabbit hole. And, you know, for me, that's where I think this goes, right? Further and further empowering the creator.
I love those examples. I think a lot of people are caught up on, you know, selling art or a moment in the studio or music. And when I say art, graphic arts, I like your timeshare example where that you can basically sell, and that is part of the creativity. I know you guys need to jump. We can't wait to see what happens with OneOf. We'll keep our creator audience up to speed, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
So much for having us.
And Jacob,
Thanks, Josh.
we've got some things to continue to talk about today. Bye, you guys.
Okay,
Have
cool.
a great day. Jacob, last time you and I spoke, you were
Yep.
in the Miami airport headed to the Bitcoin conference. You know, a lot of people, particularly independent artists, don't want to, even though they have more ability to pave their own path with NFTs, there's still lots of questions around the risks, the opportunities, the threats. So tell us more about your perspective on NFTs and what you're seeing with music clients.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, a couple of the fun ones coming up now is like the ticketing that he was just mentioning is like, you're going to have to get venues to consistently recognize a smart contract. Like how do you know the venue is going to recognize a digital NFT that somebody's showing at the door that says, hey, I get in. And it's like, we don't know who you are. That's not a ticket for our venue. So I'm seeing, you know, some more exploratory things happening now than I was a few months ago, which is great. But it's kind of like any new social media or any new internet wave, any new fad, I guess. Every week, there's also new people showing up. So some people are pushing like r.a.c. earlier is talking, they're pushing way forward with 6 agency. And then there's still new people showing up every week. And so they have to go right back to ground zero. So I think, you know, for the independent artist, not having to ask the question about their music deal or their publishing deal or their whatever really frees them up to do whatever they want. And I've seen some really creative things. But the ability to sell something for $1,000 per item has really pulled back. So $2 an item is definitely full blown the other direction. And we haven't really seen that either with music, because it's sort of a new experience, I guess. Instead of $1 per song on Apple Music, now they're talking maybe $2 or $3 per song on the blockchain as like a signed collectible, which is cool, but new, right? It hasn't happened yet. So if $1,000 per item for an independent artist isn't necessarily the move, maybe $3 per item is the move. And everywhere in between, I'm seeing questions about split royalties and who owns the IP and what are people getting when they buy my song. I think r.a.c. answered that well earlier too, which is like, it's really a digital signature on an asset, unless the terms say otherwise, unless the terms say you can commercialize this, this is your song, this is your one of one. Then most of them say no commercial rights. This is a digital signature. It's a super cool collectible. I hope you enjoy it. And that's like the general take on what I think of an NFT at this point.
So some of the reasons why people are, I mean, obviously people want to maximize the value of their craft. But today, the cost of creating a drop alone, until some of these lower cost options really come out into the marketplace, you couldn't do a $1 drop. You know, we were looking at what some of the costs alone. So if someone, again, 65% of at least Recording Academy member creators have not yet done a drop. If someone were coming to you today saying, I really want to do this, how do I get started? Aside from, you know, letting the art lead, which I think is great advice, what do you say? How do you go about doing this? How do you pick a platform? How do you make sure that you're protecting yourself?
Yeah, I think it totally starts with like, what do you want from the situation, right? Do you want to sell something for fun? Are you hoping to engage with fans, right? Like you can hear, you know, OneOf, it sounds like their goal is to create the ultimate fan club for music fans, right? Basically. But not every artist wants to create a fan club, maybe, right? Maybe they want to lean into fine art. They want to sell high-priced items and put their music on it. Or they want to do something creative like BT did with a 24-hour-long song. So the question really is, what do you want, first of all? And, you know, if it's maximize revenue, which is a fair answer, then you end up potentially in cash grab territory, which is, are you going to sell this song thing and then run away and never talk about blockchain again? Because if you are, the thing is, the consumer base is still mainly crypto people. So like betting on a platform or a new movement that's primarily credit card based is not betting on people who currently buy NFTs. People who currently buy NFTs are from the crypto world. They have crypto in their hands and their wallets. And so anytime an artist wants to show up into that crypto world, it's kind of like, okay, why do you want to do that? And if it's just revenue generation, that's likely not good enough. But I think one of my favorite artist pieces that like came out of nowhere, as far as I was concerned, was Halsey. Halsey went on Nifty Gateway and she did an oil painting. Like, she's a painter and she painted this big, beautiful piece. And she worked with a graphic artist to create little individuals of her kind of characters from the painting. And like, that was cool. That was artistic. That was unexpected. Instead of, I have a new album coming out, here's my single, I want you to pay $1,000 per single. And I paid some graphic artist off of Fiverr to make me a graphic. Some people did that, right? Some people legitimately did that over the last few months, and it didn't work. And they didn't make any money off of it, or they made 20 grand when they thought they would make 400 grand. And so I would say that the market of people who buy NFTs actively right now can smell out bad actors very quickly. And so, yeah, the question is like, look, there's maybe 50 platforms now. I think there's probably only still 10 that are relevant, maybe less than 10 that are relevant. So it's like, what do you want and where are you going? And assuming it's all, I want to do this well, I want to stick around, I want to, okay, well then maybe you create a Discord community. Maybe you make a fan club where this NFT is access to send you a message in the Discord and you respond once a week. I don't know, right? Like there's a reason that these fan club things are emerging. That might be long-winded,
so
but
objective.
helpful.
So first
Yeah.
your objective, then keeping in mind what your authenticity is to why you're doing it. Let's talk about platforms for a second. I mean, I know we just had OneOf here, but as you said, there's probably a dozen or even a half a dozen who people are doing music on. I know Imogen used OpenSea. I know some people have been using Nifty Gateway. You and I discussed, does it matter as long as it has a great UX UI where you can even put it on, promote it on your own website and knowing who your market is. So let's talk about platforms, and there's a range of charges too.
Yeah. I mean, and the newest thing happening that I'm seeing is custom smart contracts. So you can literally just spin up your own UX UI that's pretty and hire a smart contract developer for, either a percentage of sales or maybe 10, 20 grand to write a custom smart contract. And you can sell it right off your own website. You don't have to use a platform if you don't want to, but that would require your consumer base to be crypto ready, right? And like want to show up. So by partnering with a platform, they have a built-in consumer base that comes to the website every day or every other day. They get this email blast of what's going on. And I like take a platform like Audius. Audius is a very cool music focused platform built on Solana, but that makes it very music specific. And the average art collector or NFT collector isn't necessarily going to Audius. That's a music audience, which will be like the same with OneOf. It's like, okay, so it's Tezos and it's music. So it's niched. Each of these projects has their own niche. And so, yeah, that's why I say it really, the objective piece is important, because r.a.c can do art on Nifty Gateway and it works. It's art, it's music, and that's what that consumer base likes. So yeah, picking the right platform is absolutely part of the strategy, because you could always use OpenSea and pay the smallest fee, 2.5%, but no marketing. There's no marketing help from OpenSea. It's built to be wide open, so you can do whatever you want. And so now you have to go in and compete with companies that have raised 20, 30, 50 million dollars to build out marketing and curation. And, so you either give them a bigger chunk to be on their platform and get their market, or give up a small chunk, but have to build your own hype, I guess.
No, I think that's really important. And I think that, you know, a lot of people really don't know the range is what, 2.5% to 28% in some cases.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
really, you
I don't
really
know that
need
I've
to
heard
go
above,
in.
I don't know that I've heard above 20 from any of the kind of curated platforms, but yeah, 20. If I guess so, if the platform takes 20 and then your business manager, the studio, the agent want to take 10 or 15 then of what's left. And then if you're a music artist and you partner with a visual artist, well, in the traditional world, you would probably pay them a flat rate, 5-10 grand to make you a visual. But in the NFT world, people don't like that. People like to see artists compensated for creating art. So then your percentage sharing with that high-end visual artist as well. So the pie can get sliced very, like, in a lot of different ways.
I want to talk about two quick things before we go today. And thank you again for joining us. It's always awesome to talk to you. Let's talk about the resale and the recurring revenue, because I think that's a really important piece of this that either people forget or that people think they're going to make millions of dollars on the resale. So let's address both of those. And then I do want to talk a little bit about smart contracts, whether that's blockchain or otherwise, and the use of it to protect copyright, with or without NFTs.
Sure.
So whichever you want to take first.
Yeah, I'll jump to royalties. So royalties, it's very dependent on which platform you're using and what the smart contract capabilities are. But for the most part right now, platforms will only send royalties to 1 or 2 creators. So like if you make a sale from one digital wallet, typically that digital wallet is the only wallet that's going to get the resale. So if you take an artist, like I mentioned earlier, who has a manager, an agent, a publisher, whoever, 4, 5, 6 people that need a piece, a producer, a visual artist, most platforms aren't built to split revenue 7 ways automatically or royalties 7 ways automatically. So it's automatic and fantastic for independent artists who only need 1 or 2 revenue streams at most. But once you need 6 or 7 revenue streams, there is a manual component to either doing an accounting once a quarter or some amount of manual distribution. Foundation.app and then Mint-Base, which is built on Near. So Foundation's on Ethereum, Mint-Base is built on Near. They both have built royalties into their platform. So you could take 7 different people and say who gets what percentage, make a sale, everybody gets their piece forever. That's
really important.
Really, really important. That's industry leading type stuff right now. I will say I don't know like file size on either format, and Foundation is built mainly for like high-end art. And I don't know if either one can handle music, but I'm just putting it out there. It's like that's pretty cool. And that needs to happen more. Basically, that needs to become industry standard, is the full-blown split royalties, and nobody has to think about it. If blockchain is automatic, it just needs to be automatic for everyone. And so that's being worked on right now. And then the copyright question. So smart contracts aren't currently viewed as legally binding court-based documents in the US. So it's kind of, I guess for anyone listening that's not sure, like the simplest example of a smart contract is a Coca-Cola vending machine. So you walk up to something, you put in an input, you click a button, you get the output, right? So you fulfilled the contract basically to buy a Coke. You put in $1, you click a button, you get the Coke. That's essentially what a smart contract is. You click the button to buy the art gets transferred to you, the money goes to where it needs to go to. And that's a very basic definition, but I'm trying to say it's not like a contract with an indemnification clause and a dispute clause, and it's not a contract. So because of that, IP needs to be registered separately, and like likely there may even be need for like a dumb contract, which is part of where I come in. If say there's a big fancy one-of-one sale, like you sell one NFT to one creator or one collector, and it's like, hey, we're going to share revenue in the future when I use that song, or you get the commercial rights to the song, or whatever you want to say. At this point, basically requires like an attached PDF with a dumb contract. to like enforce, because it's just not enforceable at smart contract level. So it's being worked on. I've got a few different groups I could rattle off, but nobody has won that game yet. Nobody has solved we're the perfect partner to embed copyrights into your smart contract. Because if the court's not going to read the smart contract, then what's the point of a smart contract with embedded copyrights? So rights management is still going to be, terminology wise, I would say off chain for now. It has not been solved on chain, to my knowledge.
You know, and these are really important points, because I think there are definite misnomers around blockchain and smart contracts and how they can and can't be used. Clearly, there are definite benefits to it. So leave us with, I know you see a lot out in the marketplace. What are some of the most interesting NFTs related to music that you've seen in the, or things that people are even doing as follow-up? You know, one of my favorite quotes again from Ryan was, you know, making sure you don't put out a low effort NFT. What are some of the interesting ones you've seen?
Yeah, so Steve Aoki and Blau did a one-of-one commissioned NFT for a group of collectors, and only that group of collectors has the NFT. It's like it's a DAO, so it's a decentralized group of people who own basically this NFT, and it was just a custom commission job. And I don't know that artists have ever really done commission jobs like that. And that's a really interesting thing that they did. I also think, so R.A.C. mentioned briefly BT earlier. BT doing a 24-hour piece that uses oracles, and the oracles are searching for information around the world about weather patterns, time of year. And so the music itself changes throughout the 24 hours based on outside input. That's pretty cool. I also think that like it's obviously coming where there's going to be private experiences, VIP experiences. Buy this NFT, you get backstage for my next tour. Maybe you get backstage for every tour forever. Or it's redeemable for 2 tickets once upon a time on a certain tour, right? So stuff like that, I think, is going to happen for sure, and is happening. But yeah,
your point though about that, great in concept, but when you walk up to XYZ venue in any market and they don't know what to do with it, real life issue.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Yeah. We'd love to have you back, Jacob, because I know the market is changing consistently, and we're going to be doing a series of kind of shorter conversations around how the market evolves, and we hope you'll join us again.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Jacob Martin, everyone. What's the name of your firm?
It's JTM Tech Law, and I have this cheeky Twitter handle of @the_NFT_attorney. So
awesome. Well, have a great day, Jacob. Thanks for joining us today. Take care. Thanks again to our guests. We'll be continuing this series with more frequent conversations on NFTs in the weeks ahead. So join us. Visit Grammy.com/ProSessions to watch all the past sessions. And don't forget to follow the Recording Academy on YouTube, Instagram, and all your favorite social channels.